The UN climate chief, meanwhile, has weighed in on the heat wave scorching Europe, calling it the latest price to pay for fossil fuel pollution baking our planet. Well, that all comes as a high-stakes climate case has been brought by NGOs and the city of Paris against Total Energy. Today, a French court will rule on whether the oil and gas giant breached its legal duty to address environmental risks. The plaintiffs are demanding a halt in new fossil fuel projects by the French Energy Group, along with production cuts of 37% for oil and 25% for gas over the next 4 years. Total's lawyers have argued that France's corporate duty of vigilance law does not cover global warming, but the 4 NGOs bringing the case say the law's reference to prevention of environmental risks encompasses both local pollution and climate change. We're going to talk more about this now with Justine Ripoll in Strasbourg. Justine, you're the campaign manager for Notre Affaire à Tous, which is one of those French NGOs who brought the climate case against Total Energy. That verdict is due to drop very shortly. How are you feeling now? Are you optimistic?
Yeah, we're feeling, as you were saying in your reports, very hot. I'm based in Paris, but also really excited because the ruling, as you said, is going to happen any minute. And we are really confident it will be a positive decision in this case.
So if it is a positive decision, what would be the best outcome?
The best outcome would be that the judges recognize that French big polluting companies like Total have climate obligation under French law, and that they will say precisely what Total has to do, meaning that Total has to massively reduce its emissions to align with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And more concretely, the only sensible way to do that is to stop developing new oil and gas projects all over the world because we don't need them. And they will lead us to really not respecting the Paris Agreement and a world where we would have 4 degrees at least.
Now, this case at the Paris Judicial Court is the latest in a growing wave of climate litigation that's targeting major corporate emitters around the world. Do you think that these kind of legal decisions can really change things when it comes to controlling climate risks resulting from oil and gas activities?
Yeah, as you said, it's not the only case addressing those type of issues and trying to convict big polluting companies. Some have reached favorable decision, like the case of Shell in the Netherlands, but you can also have other cases in Europe that are ongoing. And all the judges in those cases, even in step victories, have said that companies have climate obligations. And it's important to remind it because those companies tend to say that only states have climate obligation and that they do not need to act. So it's important to remind them that they have climate obligations, but also the International Court of Justice said things in the same way that the states have to regulate multinational companies regarding climate change, and that those companies have legal duties regarding the fight against climate change. And in terms of impact, it's not a magical solution. Launching and winning these type of cases are really there to build a pressure and to force those companies to act because no one is above the law. So if citizens have to respect the law, those companies have obligations too. But there are also strategies and ways of fighting for climate action that are complementary to other ways of acting, like mobilization in the streets, advocating to your decision makers. So it's not a magical solution, but all in all, it will build something that would lead, we hope, to action.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate a bit. Alternatives to fossil fuels are still not perfect. You can take, for example, not a day like today, but on a windless, cloudy week in winter, gas and coal are what keep things like hospitals and heat running. Until storage catches up today, aren't fossil fuels still actually quietly preventing things like blackouts, for example, like we saw in northwestern France yesterday?
Yeah, I think there is 2 sides of the answer. The first one is that if we want to really develop clean energies, we need money to be put in developing them. And that's not what companies like Total are doing today. They put only a small part of their profits in developing clean energies, but they are mostly focusing on developing new oil and gas projects. So it's definitely not the way we need to go. And in terms of the necessity to still have fossil fuel energies today, that's a fact. We don't debate it. But as societies, we need to really discuss together in a democratic way how we want to use the fossil fuel energies that we can still use if we want to maintain global warming at the lowest level possible. Meaning we have to decide if we want air conditioning for like the hospitals, or if we want air conditioning for the offices of big companies like Total. We need to know like the amount of energy that we have left in terms of fossil fuel energy, what's the more important thing we want to put this energy on. And I'm pretty sure it's not airplanes for multi-billionaires or for air conditioning in offices of companies that are creating the problem.
All right, Justine, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. That's Justine Ripoll, the campaign manager for Notre Affaire, Tous, which is one of the French NGOs who brought that climate case against Total Energies, with the verdict set to be dropping within the next hour or so.